My dearest beloved divine friends, family, part 2. But this is In the Raw, RK's GUYANA Free Media. And I'm your friend and brother, your host, Hajji, Dr. Roshan Khan. Part 2 of Freddie Kissoon's column. This is on the 6th. The one we did was for the 5th. Defenders of Election Rigging, a Marxist and Freudian Analysis, Part 2. And this is Kaietuer News, ladies and gentlemen, of March 6th. He's saying in his column, Freddie Kissoon, I ended part 1 yesterday by stating that the mulatto society and the middle class in general did not participate or did not anticipate a PPP return to power in 2020. They had some vexations with the way the AFC government performed from 2015 to 2020. These strata were overall comfortable with the neo-liberal directions of the government. But you know, ladies and gentlemen, it's sad that they would want a government in power and they did not have the sense to anticipate that they would lose power. I've been telling everybody that the AFC will lose power. I was overseas, I was with some professor, a very great friend of mine, even in the capital, having discussions and event taking place, in which I launched a book and other things, and I received awards. And they asked me, what do you think will happen to the Guyanese election? And I told them that I believe the AFC will lose power. And they want to know why I think so. I explained to them, you got to understand, you cannot try to destroy the sugar industry without preparation, without talking to the stakeholders, the people, without prepare them. And that would have a serious effect on the national economy, in which the entire country will suffer, and not only the 7,000 or 8,000 sugar workers that would be displaced, but in the towns and villages that the estates are being closed down, it will be destruction and people's lives will be wiped out. They, the workers, remember you're talking about 7,000 plus workers, let me say 8,000 workers. But what about their wives, their children, their mothers, their fathers, their relatives, their cousins, their neighborhood, the city and the village economy? They all will be directly and indirectly affected. Nothing was put in place to compensate these people, and they had to fight. This was my explanation for their severance, or what you call payoff. They had to fight, and it came too little too late, and economies were already beaten, broken. So this, my friends and families, I saw that would cause a destruction and a loss of the AFC in the election, and two, particularly the AFC, because it will reverberate to the friends and families, and the sugar industry is like one big family, whichever part of the country they are. And so they will have the sympathy of that class, the working class structure, even across the ethnic divide. Because Gaisuka is not only about Indians, you know, majority Indians, but a large part of Afghanis and mixed population depend upon sugar. So they didn't think of anything. I advised them not to. I advised them to start a huge cattle industry, processing of meat and milk, goat and sheep, fishing industry using the canals for some of them, coconut estates to produce oil for cosmetics and soaps and shampoos and so on. Work with the New Zealanders, the Australians, partner with the people from Holland or Netherlands for milk production and processing condensed milk. But they can't see. It's as if the APNO AFC had a hate of sugar and the lands and the people who work there. This is my viewpoint, ladies and gentlemen. Back to the article. They saw in Granger a middle-class personality that they would accept any day than a Bharrat Jagdeo or Donald Ramotar or Irfaan Ali. As the election campaign began in December, they could not have envisaged a win for the PPP. I did. I know it. Their uneasiness about the PPP first started with the game changer, the no confidence vote. In my piece yesterday, that's part one, Freddie is saying in his piece, he mentioned that throughout the year of the machinations to avoid the effect of the no confidence vote, not even one article was published about the illegalities of the PNC and AFC in the weekly in the Diaspora column. By Thursday afternoon, on Monday 4th, when the world knew the PPP had won, the mulatto groupings had become resigned for two reasons. In other words, they resigned themselves. For the rigging was too blatant, barefaced, comical and sickening. It was subtle and sophisticated. They may have had an excuse to accept an APNO AFC victory, but it was too open, the rigging. The class structure, the intelligentsia of that mulatto group could not have accepted it. In fact, three women from this stratum published an interview with the Chronicle supporting Claudette Singh. But as Singh's deportment became more and more unpalatable, their open support for rigging disappeared. This stratum chose to remain silent. I hope you guys are understanding from part one to part two what is happening. A second reason for their reticence was fear of loss of credibility why they stayed quiet. They did not want to lose their credibility or their name in society. Highly respected international figures from all over the world were condemning the rigging. The list of eminent personalities, including past and present CARICOM prime ministers and the current vice chancellor of the University of the West Indies. Because of space constraint, we have to move on to other compartment mentioned in part one that had their Freudian reasons for staying silent. But all these people were speaking against it. They couldn't hide it anymore. Their topic is an involved one, and a third of a column will not do justice to the analysis. So the remaining section of this article will just be brief notes. Otherwise, it will go on to a part three, ladies and gentlemen. Why did people like Rupert Narayan, Dr. Clive Thomas, Dr. Nigel Westmus, Dr. Arif Bulkan, Moses Bhagwan, UC Guyana, and others chose not to denounce one of the world's most tragic attempts to rape democracy in Guyana in an age where that was almost impossible in these parts of the world? All the names featured above saw the 2020 election contest as a war involving a party that they feared coming back to power. It doesn't mean that they like the APNO AFC. They don't want the PPP's return. So they really don't like them, but just hated the PPP. Here's where Freud comes in, that psychologist, the father of psychology. In their mind lies a deep non-approval of the PPP. Peoples like Moses Bhagwan and UC Guyana have never forgiven the PPP for reducing their role in Guyanese politics. Those men will never forgive Charlie Jagan. For them, Jagan is the PPP and the PPP is Jagan. Now what happened after the 1992 election, late 1992 and early 1993, but 1992 elections, they had thought that because they had given verbal support without a coalition to the PPPC, that the PPPC under Dr. Charlie Jagan would have given them some positions of authority and power, and then thereby giving the WPA a position of standing and strength. And in a way, they wanted Dr. Jagan to show some kind of appreciation and gratefulness for what they have done. Well, Charlie Jagan, being as it may be, he might have been a humanist as people are trying to portray him, But the fact remains that he was a political master. And he really didn't trust putting the hands into these people who could eventually try to destroy the PPP. This is what I gather as one who tries to think. I'm no analyst like Freddie Kissoon or Christopher Ram or other such giants. But in my mind, I conceptualize this idea and vision. They both gravitated to the WPA in the 70s because they saw the WPA as replacing the PPP, thereby gaining their revenge on Jagan. It will need at least 2 more columns to analyze Robert Ryan. He is perhaps an atavistic return to the era of the Middle Ages, light complexion Indians in the 40s who preferred to socialize with the Europeans. And I think we covered all of that, but some repetition is not bad. People like Rupert Ryan, the Ramsahoys, the Lacous, Peter Degar, Indian colleagues, choose to attach themselves to the Creole Portuguese class, light complexioned people, Indians in the 40s who preferred to socialize with the European society in British Guyana. Many of them had wanted to become members of the Georgetown Club, unless you were fair-skinned. Because you're members of the Georgetown Club, you could not have achieved certain recognition and position, so to say. They evolved from, in fact, are pleasant humans. They say they have pleasant humans. They're not racial. It is just that at the cultural level, they prefer European values. These fair-skinned Indian people of position and power prefer the European system and their culture. Do you know one of the most prominent living Guyanese personalities dropped his Indian last name and adopted a Western Christian last name? Do you know that? Prominent Guyanese Indian dropped his last name and adopted a European last name, Western European style last name. Ironically, white American Janet Jagan embraced Indian culture. The attitude of these people to the 2020 rigging is the same as their colleagues in the mulatto ethnic community, and I hope you all are paying attention, right? Finally, the WPA people like Clive Thomas, Joycelyn Dow, Bonita Bone, Dr. Nigel Westmus, Dr. David Hines, and other WPA remnants. The problems between these people and the PPP run long and deep. The choice for them is APNU AFC, not the PPP. Their historical approach to contemporary dialectics in Guyana is that the WPA should have been the rightful heir of the vacuum that existed after folks' Burnham totalitarian tyranny was extirpated. So they believe they should have taken the position after Burnham dictatorship came to an end. These names that I just called. And also they had hoped the WPA to replace Dr. J.D. Jagan because they were having kind of a mass movement, they hoped, of Indians and Africans, and they would have brought us together in a beautiful blending and mixing of society. But it didn't happen. The thought and the wisdom was a good one, to my opinion. They felt deeply hurt, and they have become unforgiving at what the PPP did to them in 1992, like I just explained a bit earlier, what the PPP did to them in the election. That was no reason for wanting Guyana to return to dictatorship through rigged election in 2020. You had to put country first. They did not. He is saying they can't forgive the PPP. J.D. Jagan is the PPP, even though J.D. Jagan is dead and gone. They're frightening the man, Joby. Right? So J.D. dead and gone, they're still scared of the man and think that the PPP is, now we hear the PPP is Bharrat Jagdeo. These are ways of people's thinking, and they can't forgive Chadijiga nor the PPP for what they did to the WP by not giving them positions of power, is what he's trying to infer. He can't go on with this because it will take many more colonies. So they would have preferred even a rigged dictatorship rather than to have the PPP come in power. And Freddie Kissoon is saying they were wrong. That they should have put country first instead of supporting wrong the dictatorship, which would have spelled many decades of tyranny in this society. Your friend, dear brother, me, Hajji Dr. Roshan, calling on the government of Guyana to recognize Freddie Kissoon, to compensate his wife for having terminated her, compensate her recognition with a proper job and contract, and same thing with Freddie Kissoon, to compensate him or reappoint him, giving the man a national award for being a Democrat, for not necessarily being a political maniac for a party, but he would go against any party if to him they are not democratic enough for the country. So I actually respect the guy, and I'm calling on this Excellency President Dr. Bharrat Jagdeo, Vice President Dr. Bharrat Jagdeo, and President Dr. Irfaan Ali, and Prime Minister Mark Phillips, and the entire cabinet, particularly President Dr. Irfaan Ali, to recognize this man and give him one of those awards that they want to give to the vanguards of democracy, those who were tormented, struggled, pushed, embarrassed. And I don't expect anything ever from any government in power. So I am not expecting anything for myself, not an appointment, not a position, not an opportunity, not an award, not something to serve humanity in the country. Areas where people are taking advantage of Guyanese, poor people especially, to sign a document, I am not going to expect anything from the government. I stand for, like Freddie Kissoon in a way, for principle and ethics. And if anything is to come to me, it will come from the Creator and Lord. I have no expectations anymore. I'm at peace. But I'm asking for Freddie Kissoon to be granted one of those national awards that the man truly deserves: compensation, recognition for his wife who was wrongly terminated, and him, Freddie Kissoon, for Guyana and the world need commentators and analysts like Freddie Kissoon, including Christopher Rahn. Another one, your friend, your brother, me, Hajji, Dr. Roshan Khan in the Raw. Say thank you for tuning into this RKS Guyana Free Media in the Raw. And I say farewell, friends.